Right, so back to today's topic and our lovely panelist. We have Fiona Warner, who's a lead researcher at Hargreaves Lansdown. Just going to talk a little bit more about her experience in general and her career journey. We have Alicia Teagle, who's a co-founder of SR2, which is a socially responsible recruitment agency. She has a bag full of amazing information and stats for us today. And finally, we have Hannah Whiteley, who's a UX and service design consultant. And she's going through a career change at present, so I think her perspective is going to be really, really interesting in this conversation. So the idea is to have a bit of a chat. We have some of you send questions ahead of this talk today, so we're going to go through those. I've come up with a couple of questions that I always wanted someone to answer, so we'll go through those as well. And yeah, we'll get the conversation going. Before we do that, and before I ask the first question, it will be great if we get to learn a little bit about what everybody else is doing. So if you could join the Slido, so you can either go at slido.com and type in that code, or with your phones you can just scan the QR code. I think scanning the QR code is probably easier, and then you can use your phone as a little control panel thing. I'll give it just a minute. And then we'll go to the first poll for tonight. Just want to know where you are at your own UX career. Are you looking to get into UX? Are you perhaps a bit more senior, or you're just growing, kind of progressing on the UX ladder? It'd be nice to know a little bit about you. And while the answers are coming through, I will start with Fiona. If you don't mind just introducing yourself in a bit more details and talk to us about your own kind of UX journey and how you ended up in UX research.
Yeah, cool. I was actually hoping I wouldn't go first, so I know how much detail to cover, but let's go for it. So I'm Fiona. I'm currently lead user researcher at Hargreaves Lansdown in Bristol, where I manage a team of 12. I actually got into UX. The short version is back in early 2016, 8 years ago, shockingly, I was looking for a career change, and I did a boot camp in London. I spent the first, after I kind of came out of that, I spent the first year as a sole UX designer in a few companies. I did a mix of research and design, but eventually I decided that I wanted to focus on one discipline. So I chose research and specifically went for those sorts of roles. And I also wanted to be amongst a team, so I wanted to learn from other people rather than being the sole UXer in a company, because I thought that would push my learning and my experience. So I ended up for the past 6 years I've been in fintech, which was never in my intention. I started at IG, I'm now at HL, and I also never imagined being a manager of a team. So I've always pushed back on that because I thought it was a completely different role, but an opportunity came up at HL and I thought it was a nice opportunity in a friendly environment that I was already familiar with. So I stepped into that, and 2.5 years later, I'm managing a team of 12, shockingly. So it's been a very steep learning curve for 8 years.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for this. That's great. And to a team of 12, wow.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
I bet. It must be very rewarding as well, though.
It has its very rewarding days, I gotta say. I love my team.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Alicia, I'm going to go to you next because Hannah's story is quite interesting and kind of slightly different as well. So I want to leave that to
Yeah,
your last.
definitely leave her last because then, I don't sound like the awful recruiter who's in the room.
So,
Cool.
so I know you are not a UXer, obviously, which, I have to apologize to everybody. It's not it's not a full panel of UXers, but I think your perspective is really interesting. And obviously that's your job, is to get people into UX jobs. So yeah, if you want to just tell us a bit about your journey.
Yeah, of course. So, good evening, everyone. As V said, my name's Alicia. I am the co-founder of SR2, which stands for Socially Responsible Recruitment. Bristol-based recruitment company. We started 7 years ago, although just opened our London office. Well, London office 2 years ago, and we've just opened up our American office over in Texas. We're about 60 people, and we're the first B Corp technology recruitment company in the UK. And also just voted the most sustainable recruitment company in the UK, which we're really proud of. Alongside SR2, I'm also the founder of a couple of other bits and pieces. So Women Rock, which is our ED&I blog. Technology Volunteers is my tech company, where I connect tech folk all with really small underfunded charities, try and close the digital skills gap. Got just over 4,000 volunteers on there. And we've worked on 65 different charity projects, so doing some really cool stuff there, plus Code Bar and some other bits and pieces. Look me up on LinkedIn. I'm a bit of a crazy woman who can't stop. I'm also ADHD and dyslexic. I've had that since I was 12, so I was one of those few very young girls to get diagnosed. So something I'm really passionate about, and I'm also currently 6 months pregnant and feel like I'm going to pop. So I've done tech recruitment in the Southwest. Very proud, born and bred Bristol girl for 12 years now. There's nothing that I haven't done, I don't think, when it comes to tech. But my bread and butter has been sort of in that product world. So product management, product designers. I'm definitely not a UI UX specialist, but I have recruited quite a few of them for startup and scale ups, but also some of the bigger companies. So yeah, I've put together some stats. The market's been tough. It's been really hard the last 12 months, but there's light at the end of a very dark tunnel. And yeah, just here to give some perspective, some advice, and yeah, any questions I can answer. So that's me in short.
Awesome. And honestly, you are on top of so many things. You do need a neurospicy brain for something like this. I get exhausted just listening to you. But yeah, well done, and honestly, admiration for championing such important causes. Yeah, it's awesome. Well done. Hannah, over to you and your story.
Hello, yeah, I'm Hannah. I'm not as interesting as they built me as. I've basically been made redundant recently, which is the interesting part of the story. So, I'll give you a bit of background. I guess I started out. I actually did a degree in industrial design way back in the day, and then I got a kind of graduate program in kind of almost marketing, but kind of it was one of those where you sort of try lots of things out. So, ended up kind of like in a sort of digital space. And then moved into UX when I kind of applied for a job at lastminute.com. So I worked there for a few years, and then worked at Premier Inn for a few years. And then moved over into consultancy, which I've been doing for the last sort of five or so years. Until about a month ago when I got kind of made redundant. So I might be chatting to Alicia after this. So if anyone knows of any jobs going, then just let me know. But yeah, that's kind of basically my story. I've sort of done a bit of everything. I guess you'd call me a bit of a generalist. So moved over all of the spectrum from interaction design through to service design and kind of most things in between. I think coding is possibly the one I haven't really done much of, but you've kind of inspired me chatting about that. And yeah, I've sort of managed teams at various points and not managed teams and kind of done a bit of everything. So yeah, I'll try to bring my kind of perspective to this today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. That's great. And I'm so sorry you're going through a tough patch, but you were saying earlier, it happens, right? And
yes,
it can happen to anyone, and as much as sometimes it seems like the worst thing that can happen to you, it could be blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
At the end, it kind of makes you pivot sometimes, or just rethink things, and you may end up in a better place. Who knows?
Mhm.
In fact, I'm sure you're gonna end up in a better place.
Well, it's a good time of year to be made redundant because it's just been sunny here since I got let go. So yeah, I can't imagine it in winter. It might be a bit more tragic, but yeah, it's not too bad right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And just coming back to me, just a quick intro for those who perhaps haven't been on one of those calls before. I'm one of the co-organizers of Ladies That UX. I'm V. Rogachiva. I'm head of product design at Go Compare. I manage a team of 4 designers at various levels, and I've been previously in managerial roles of managing teams of different sizes. I have experience recruiting designers at different levels as well. So where I can, I'll chip in, but it's the panel's expertise, I think, outweighs mine in this particular case. So I'll let you guys answer some of the questions. Just looking at the Slido, I can see, thank you so much for engaging with that little poll. It gives us a really great picture of potentially how to focus the conversation. I can see quite a few people are looking to get into UX, and that's great. Honestly, I'm so excited for you. UX is a fantastic space to be in, and I'm really glad that people, and especially women, are looking to get into this space. We need you, right? Design needs women. It's important stuff. There's some junior UXers, and once you get in there, of course, you're looking to progress, and that is the right thing to do. We will also try and cover a couple of questions about the more perhaps established designers in the audience. So I'm hoping everybody's gonna have some takeaways out of the conversation today. So Alicia touched a little bit about the state of UX today. So I really want to get a feel for what everybody thinks that is. And Alicia, you promised us some numbers. So while people are filling their answers here, so how do you feel about the state of UX right now? I know that there are obviously some redundancies and things have been a bit rocky, I guess. It's a bit more difficult to find jobs, especially for junior designers. Alicia, what do you see on your end? How do things look like from a recruitment point of view?
Sure. So yeah, some numbers. We all like cold hard facts. 563 designer jobs were posted in the UK in May. Obviously, I know we've got a day left, but in the last 30 days, and 242 research jobs posted. This is just on LinkedIn. If we look at sort of broader, obviously not everything's on LinkedIn, and people think that, yeah, if it's not on LinkedIn, it doesn't exist. That's not the case. And I think especially in the design and research market, there's a lot of different places to find jobs. And there was actually 2,908 jobs which are currently live across the UK, outside of just LinkedIn. So people think, as say, yeah, LinkedIn is the be all and end all, and it's not. It's a lot more vast than that. The permanent market is definitely trickier than the contract and consultancy market. We've got, in terms of where we're at the moment, the new financial year obviously started in April, but we also had Easter really early this year, which really affected the start of the new financial year. So companies took a little bit of a while to pick back up again, but we're really starting to see some increase in hiring. The contract market being a little bit more buoyant than the permanent market. And the reason mainly for that is because we have got this general election that is coming up in July, and companies are just sort of sitting on their hands for a little bit to see what government that we're going to get. It is going to steer quite a few business decisions. We won't get into politics. I'm definitely not a politics expert, but yeah, a lot of companies, as I say, are just sitting tight until after the summer to see where things go. So look, the market is still tough. I think we're going to see a lot of movement in the market come sort of September, not August. August is a terrible month for recruitment just because everyone's on holiday. But sort of Q4 this year looks really, really positive. So we're seeing some movement for sure, but I think later on in the year is when things are going to really really improve, and if predictions are right, then 2025 is looking super promising, to be back on our feet to what we're kind of used to, but definitely not the last couple of years because it's just been insane, but sort of pre-pandemic times.
You say it has been insane, and I totally agree. I have never seen anything like this. During the pandemic, and just after, like the Great Resignation, was, oh my goodness, a wave of people movement from one place to another. It was just extraordinary to watch. To be fair, I did join the wave and moved from where I was to go compare, so I can't say I didn't take part. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we're just coming down from that high of just crazy recruitment that happened.
You see in people's CVs over the last couple of years, normally on average, people in tech last between about 18 months and 2.9, 2 years and 9 months. That's sort of an average someone stays in a job. If you look at, like, again, not everyone, but a lot of CVs, people were moving every sort of 11 to 13 months in that time, just because there was so much shiny stuff, there was so much money being poured out, that people were just jumping. So that sort of 2020, basically those COVID pandemic years, people had like 3 jobs in that time because the market allowed for it. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Fiona, I can see you're nodding. What's your feel for the landscape at the moment?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm in-house. I'm not freelance, and I never have been. And I think when you're in-house, you feel separated from what's going on around. But I noticed that, like, was it just before Christmas last year, there was we had the Great Resignation, but then we have the Great Redundancy wave as well. I think I can see it in the Slido. AI has really changed the landscape. One, it's made a bunch of big companies get rid of a lot of their UX people, but it's also put a little bit of fear into UX people, and they're starting to feel little bit cautious about their roles as well, and kind of the scope of that. It has been, I mean, it's been great as a recruiter because, like, for me to hire, it was so easy over the past year or two. But yeah, for anyone out there looking, it's been really challenging, and it feels really bad not to be able to offer more opportunities. And it's cutthroat because those people who do have roles are expecting more for less. They want more skills, they want unicorns and pay them less rather than actually, like, take what they really need to get the job done, I think. So yeah, it's been, but Alicia, I'm so glad to hear those numbers. Like, I'm so glad it's coming back, because I feel like it's taken us so long to get a seat at the table, and then it's been the last couple of years has just shaken our confidence in that.
Yeah, it's some really good points. And unicorns, I mean, typical recession thinking, like do more with less, right? Hannah, you've been literally impacted by this. So what are your thoughts? I mean, I can see a lot of people feeling quite, shaken by the current state of the things and kind of unsure and insecure, and you're going through a redundancy at the moment. What are your feels? And I can imagine you've started looking already. So how do you feel about the whole thing?
Yeah, I think I echo what everyone else is sort of saying in terms of, yeah, I think where I worked, there was sort of the work was sort of dropping off. I think companies aren't spending so much on things like, UX is kind of the first thing that, not the first thing that gets cut. I think that's events, but UX kind of gets cut like quite quickly. If there are people that are spending on consultancies, they kind of cut that back. And then where I worked, the work was just sort of drying up. So they let a bunch of people go, and I've heard that there's been a bunch of redundancies. I think this is the time of year when redundancies are sort of made. So I heard like IDEO had made redundancies as well, and people like that. So Yeah, and then I sort of echo that thing of like people seem to want a lot. Like I've seen a lot of UX/UI, which to me is kind of like weird because I just think they are very different, like very different disciplines. I don't feel like I could do UI, but I could do UX extremely well. So, and then the same with like developers who are also UXers, which I find, like what you were saying at the beginning, developers don't really seem to do UX. It sort of seems to be one or the other. So yeah, people kind of wanted the moon on a stick a little bit, but yeah, I think. Yeah, and actually sort of think about if you're sort of coming into this market, it can be so confusing, like working out all the job titles, like working out like what is UX, what is UI, what is product design versus UX and UX. Product design is a whole new word that hadn't been around when I was looking 5 years ago. Um, yeah, where do you even start like looking? And then also the different levels, like what is lead, what is senior, what is, and people write mid/senior, but what does that even mean? So and the biggest thing that annoys me out of everything is why don't you just put how much you're going to pay me for this? Because that's the big question. That's all I care about. Like honestly, like are you going to pay enough to cover my mortgage? Like that's what I really want to know. All the other nonsense could kind of, but yeah, that's kind of my kind of view on the market at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on the salary bit, but also expecting unicorns. And I can see someone commented as well that they feel like companies want unicorns, and there is a lot of confusion about different roles, which gives me a great segue into my next question, which is exactly that. I mean, there's like UX, there's product design, there's content design. Research obviously is a whole discipline of its own. Then we go into adjacent disciplines like business analyst, product management, and then UI design and the infamous UX/UI. I mean, what is your advice for someone who's just starting, and how to navigate this, and how do you think they should make sense of the whole taxonomy we seem to have out there in the design world? Hannah, do you want to take that, since you started already touching a little bit on it?
Yeah, I mean, I did sort of think about this beforehand because I was sort of thinking about how to describe how I see the different disciplines. There is quite a good diagram, which is like it shows UI and then UX and then kind of service design. I sort of see it as a bit of a spectrum in my head. The UI, I don't know. At one end, you've kind of got interaction design and kind of it's almost like the micro stuff. Like you're looking at like really intimate sort of details on a service or a website or whatever, and then you've got the other end, which is service design, which is the macro, which is like looking at whole systems and services, and then in between you've kind of got UX, which kind of sits on this sort of spectrum as well, and then you've got these other disciplines that kind of sit into, then you've got kind of specialist disciplines, I guess, that sit inside them. So research is one, and I've noticed, well, where I was working before, there was a lot more specialist researchers, whereas my background is more interaction design, I would say. There are more specialist researchers now who kind of specialize in research methodologies or kind of that sort of area. And then you get other specialists, like to me, like content design is another specialism. Content design is an odd one actually, because it always to me feels like a part of UX and information architecture, but content designers tend to come from the writing backgrounds, like the former journalists, some of them, and stuff like that. So that's a bit of an odd one to me, because that one feels like it should be more like information architecture, but actually sits sort of slightly around sort of designing kind of page layouts alongside words. And then we've also then got the stuff that sits slightly outside of that kind of spectrum to me, which is stuff like product management, which I think a lot of, I don't know why, I've heard this rumor that a lot of male UXers end up going into product management because it pays more. But I find product management, like, I would never ever do it because it's just wrangling sheep the whole time. So you're basically someone who's like in the middle of the developers and the UX people, and you're trying to like make them agree, and the stakeholders. So that's kind of like the job as I sort of see it. And then obviously you then got development, which is actually the building of the house or whatever, if you want to think about it that way. So I hope that's not a confusing story of all the different jobs you could possibly do. Oh yeah, sorry. And then there's this new thing called product design, which I think is UI design, but I could be wrong about that. It seems to me to be sitting in that UI design end. And in terms of advice, I guess, I don't know, I guess it's, to me, the UI design is more like graphic design. So if you feel like you're more in that kind of very creative graphic design type end of the spectrum, then that would be more for you. Service design is much more, cerebral might be the right word, but it's slightly more technical, but also you're looking at sort of big stakeholder management projects. You look at big things. So it's that end. And UX, I think, is more, the reason I like UX is because it's somewhere between creativity and technical. So it's like I get to use my maths brain, but I also get to use my art brain. So if that appeals to you, then I think that's, and if you like wrangling sheep, then maybe product management is for you as well. So or if you like words, content management might be for you. So hope that's a kind of a good summary. I don't know. Yeah, that was quite a long ramble, but yeah, I hope that helps.
Awesome. And Fiona, you are a researcher and you lead a team of researchers, and that is quite a specific thing within the UX mind map. What's your view of this kind of taxonomy that we use across the industry, and how do you think that impacts research in particular? Where is the space, the kind of the place of research within the whole thing?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I started out, I was going into companies where I was the only UXer. So I was wearing multiple hats. So I would have been known as, I guess, what they call now a product designer. So I was UX, UI, and research. And I was starting out. I had no idea how to really do any of those very well, but it was where the opportunities were. It's only when I joined larger companies that I started to see where they separate the disciplines. And it's because they have that capacity and they have so many teams that they need to feed UX resource into. So at HL, we actually have research, we have UX design, we have UI design, we have content design, and then we have the graphic design team, or the that help with the marketing as well. So we are very split out, but we work very closely together, and we get embedded into different squads, but each squad has different needs. So actually the pairings will be different. So you might send in a UXer with a service design background and a researcher, or you might send in a researcher in content, or you might send in a UX designer and a UI designer. Like the blend is really dependent on the work being done and kind of what they're dealing with. I would say in fintech research, we have many UX designers in our team who have done research before, or they have done UI design before, but we specialize where we are. I think it's necessary for research for somewhere like HL and even IG. Fintech is highly regulated. We have so many rules. We have so many restrictions over what we can do that actually just being able to run research, there's so many like hoops that we have to jump through to be able to do it. So I kind of always say, if somebody, one of the designers comes to me and says, am I able to run research? And I'm like, cool, do you want to have a look through all our processes and guides? And are you happy to do all that on your own? And they kind of go, no, I'm good. So I think it's great having that separation. I love having the separation because you get to focus on a discipline, right? You get to really understand it and learn it really well. So I think for people starting out, it is confusing. You may not get a choice, get the experience where you can. Maybe later on you'll get to choose where you want to focus, or you might want to be a bit more T-shaped and do everything, and that's great, but you've got to find the right role and the right opportunity to use all those skills as well, because you do get rusty. Like trying to do all of this stuff is hard, and doing it well at a quality is quite taxing. So I think it's got to suit what you're looking for and where your skills and your interest is. Like, where is your enjoyment? What do you actually enjoy doing is kind of key to choosing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I have to say, you can switch, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Fiona, you've switched from UX to kind of specialize specifically in UX research. Hannah's done different roles as well. I've started as a generalist. Now I'm kind of managing, overseeing. I'm doing less and less of the actual juicy stuff, which sometimes I miss greatly. But you can choose. It doesn't have to be one thing for the rest of your life, right? Alicia, why are we UXing, UIing stuff? I mean, what is wrong with employers, really?
Say the question again, sorry. What is
UX, UI, why is this a thing that people are recruiting for?
because people want two for the price of one.
That's my only explanation, because it does not exist, right? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, you see it a little bit more in the startups than you do the bigger companies, and just because, again, they want someone who can wear a number of hats and someone who can be a bit of a generalist. And I think, to be fair, I think sometimes it's good, especially if you're starting out, to go in one of those smaller companies to really get a feel for where you shine and what you're good at, and what the actual each of those what they consist of. And then sort of your next role after that, you can then focus on maybe, being a specialist in one or two areas. But you don't see that in I definitely don't see that in the bigger companies. But yeah, it is companies just wanting, two for the price of one.
Yeah, it is interesting, because I feel that when someone's advertising a UX UI role, they're alienating quite a lot of people. So people who don't feel strong in UX wouldn't apply, and people who don't feel strong in UI wouldn't apply either. So like, it's very specific people who feel confident they can cover both.
It's also one of the hardest things to actually search for. So as a recruiter, we use something, again, you don't anymore. When you're experienced, you've got your networks and you don't really use, but say who's a relatively new recruiter, they'll use something called a Boolean. And so a Boolean, they'll search UI, but if you put UI on your profile, UI just doesn't come up, because it's not a thing. It needs to be actual user experience or user research. But in UI UX is an actual thing that the internet sort of picks up from a recruitment perspective, is really difficult. Is like recruiting for Golang engineers is impossible, because if you write Go, then everything just comes up when everyone's ever wrote Go on their profile. There's some things that are really difficult, and UI UX is one of those things. It's just really tricky to actually find the person. But yeah, just a little bit of advice. Actually call yourself a user experience or user researcher.
It's a really good point, though, that you made, that someone who's perhaps starting or earlier in their career, they're not sure where their interest lies or where they want to build expertise, could go for a role like this that's kind of a little bit more of a generalist. I would really call it a generalist rather than UX UI, but obviously each to their own. These things seem to persist with UX UI. I don't know when it started, who started it, but it's there. Cool, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sure there will be more questions about this. This is a constant topic of confusion. So please, if you need a bit more clarification and you have specific questions, do post it either in the Slido or in the chat. I'll do my best to pick those up. So having a nice little segue, and now keep us on kind of more of a recruitment side of things. What are your thoughts about portfolios? It's kind of that UX UI thing a little bit. I have a little poll as well for everybody to kind of engage. Thoughts on portfolios? Alicia, I feel like you've probably seen like gazillion portfolios. So is it a yes or a no or a maybe, or what is it with portfolios?
Again, it depends on the role. Advice with portfolios, where I always say to people, and I've seen a lot, and I've seen some ones I'm like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And I've also seen ones that you're like, oh, that's so bad, but you've worked so hard on it. Quality over quantity is like my biggest tip with portfolio. Really curating your best work and showcasing a diverse range of projects that and then tailoring it to your audience. There's too many people in their portfolio. Say, for example, they're going for a fintech role, their portfolio is completely dedicated to food, for example. So just being a little bit more tailored, making sure it's mobile friendly. A lot of people forget about this. I don't know what the stat is nowadays, probably like 99.9% of people use their phone for everything. And yeah, it's one thing that just really gets forgotten about. But yeah, you still see portfolios. Are they still a thing? I'm going to say yes, but I think CVs and the future of that is going to change. And I mean, we've already seen it through LinkedIn. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. But I think Fiona and Hannah's probably got a little bit better to answer that.
Yeah, and I was just gonna ask Hannah if are you putting a portfolio together? What are your thoughts on the portfolio?
I hate putting my portfolio together. It feels like everyone else in the world has to just put a CV together, and that's the worst thing. And we have to do this huge, like, I don't know, it takes me ages. But I have put it together. I don't think mine will be called brief. I don't think I've taken Alicia's advice there. Mine is probably, I think, because I've done so many projects over the years, it's almost like I don't know, I was always trying to put together something where someone could pick and choose what they read. But yeah, I think that's the trouble. The longer you're in it, the more you've got, and it's harder to sort of then choose what you put in it. But yeah, mine is a website. And yeah, I didn't, what's the word, sort of add stuff I was going. I had to sit down and almost dedicate like a week, like solidly, like 9 to 5 to kind of do it. And I do think it's to me, it's one of the biggest barriers to switching roles, or kind of moving on when you feel like you want to move on, or looking for roles is kind of that portfolio. That's been my experience anyway. Every time I've wanted to leave, it's like I want to, but I've got to put this portfolio together, and that's a huge sort of mental sort of strain. And to actually put it together. But yeah, mine is basically, it's just a collection of case studies and things about me and stuff like that. And I can happily share it with anyone if anyone wants to kind of have a look at what I wouldn't say a good portfolio, just a portfolio looks like. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful.
And how do you deal with cases where the projects weren't so visually appealing? I mean, as consultant, I'm sure you've worked more on those kind of strategic projects or service design projects where you don't end up with a neat design, or the neat design is a form which is not sexy to put on a portfolio. What do you do?
I think what I've done is kind of create ones that are kind of actually, I don't know, I've got some hero images like at the top. It depends what it is. Yeah, sometimes it's like information architecture, which is really hard to like show. But you can show little bits and pieces, like extract stuff like little diagrams you've made, or like even corners of things if you can do that. And then the rest of it is mostly just content. So it sort of talks to like what I did, like what the outcomes were. Yeah, what the kind of what role I took on the project, and that's much more wordy, to be honest. So yeah, a few visuals. I mean, for example, like if there are good visuals, putting them into like, I don't know, like a computer, I can't remember what we call it now, but making it look like it's real, that can really, don't know, that makes it kind of pop for some reason. But yeah, where it is less visual, you can always just write, I don't know, just try to write the words, because I think for a UX person, it's a case study is words, and just take where visuals kind of where you can, even if it is just one or two, just to make the page look kind of, I don't know, pull out the page a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd gladly offer to share my portfolio, but it's in a state at the moment that I just can't find the time to. I've changed. So you said yours on a website.
Yes.
Mine was on Squarespace, but then they started charging something stupid, like almost £30 a month. So I thought that's too much for a page that no one looks at.
Yeah. And that's it, when no one does look at it, but in between times, right, you're sort of paying for like, I don't know, if you're a freelancer, then yeah, but if you're just, it's every 3 or 4 years that you kind of pay this huge amount of money. But mine's on Wix, actually, and I found them really good. About 5 years ago when I made it, it was harder to use. Now it's super easy. So they've got like literally got a portfolio template on there, so you can just use that. The other thing, which is kind of weird, is having headshots taken, which for our industry I wouldn't have thought was necessary, but apparently everybody needs a headshot nowadays. So yeah, if you could get a professional headshot done, apparently that will, I don't know if that, to be fair, Alicia's probably better to answer this question of whether that actually helps, but I've got like a headshot on my portfolio as well, which is yeah.
That's a good tip. I don't know what you think, Alicia. Does that make a difference? Logically it does, but we can't all afford a professional headshot.
To be fair, it's a really good point, and it's nothing that I've thought about. It wouldn't steer me from a recruitment perspective if someone had one or not, to whether they're right for the job. It wouldn't put me off, so I don't know. That is a really good point. I'm not sure, but then also if you think about it from LinkedIn, if someone doesn't have a LinkedIn picture,
Yeah,
then I probably wouldn't contact them.
Yes,
So
please,
the answer
LinkedIn pictures, very important.
So the answer is probably yes, have one, but yeah, you don't need a professional one, as long as it's there. Can I just ask a question quickly, just because a question popped up somewhere and I was just answering it while Hannah was speaking, but is it in the chat group, or are they coming up on Slido? Because otherwise I'm answering it in the chat.
It's in the Google chat. So feel free to just send the if you can post the links, that will be awesome.
Yeah.
It was on Slido. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw someone post about where can I look for jobs.
I think 3 in Slido.
It's in Slido, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, popped up.
There's a few questions in Slido.
Awesome. I will have a look at this in a second, but Alicia, if you don't mind, so the question was, what are the other platforms other than LinkedIn? I think it's going to be useful for everyone, so if you just pop it in the chat, that would be amazing. And I will have a look at the questions in Slido in just a second. Fiona, I just want to go over to you. UX research, I mean, does that
need a portfolio?
No.
No. Yeah, I can see where you'd need it for UX, UI, a few of those things. Research, you don't have anything visual, so actually what you'd probably be doing is kind of writing up case studies. So I did used to have a Wix site, Hannah, it's a great site. But yeah, similar, I found if I'm staying in a job for a couple of years, the cost builds up. So I got rid of it, and actually I only need to build like a PDF portfolio to share that when I'm actually job hunting. So I never expect to see a portfolio when I'm recruiting, because I know that I'm going to be asking them to present during part of the interview process anyway, and that's where I will get a feel for how they work, what they cover, that kind of thing. I would say that I do sit in interviews as part of the panel for my UX design lead and my content design lead. So I hear their rants about portfolios and things like that. Yes to a photo on your LinkedIn. Always keep your LinkedIn updated. It's critical. We all check CVs against LinkedIn to check for consistency, let's say. But having an image there is really key. Whereas actually I've heard different reactions to photos on portfolios and CVs and stuff like that. So some people like them, some people don't. I don't think there's a strong push there, but definitely on your LinkedIn, it's kind of, we do a bit of, background stalking when we're recruiting. So do keep your details updated and have a presence. I think what's important for a portfolio is, regardless of which role or which discipline you're going into, it's not like, even for visual design and UX design, it's not just about what it looks like. Yes, that is important. What we're really looking for is how you got there. Like, how do you figure this stuff out? What's your way of, show your work? Do you remember being in school and sitting through maths class and the teacher's like, show your work? It's still the same. We want to see the background. It's not always about the finished product. It's like, how did you get there? We want to know, what's your process? Do you collaborate? How do you get inspiration? All of that kind of stuff.
really good points. And like you, I don't ask for portfolios when I recruit designers, and I'm looking, in my team we have product designers now. There's various interpretations on product designers, but we are more strategic than UI, tactical designers. That's why if someone sends a portfolio as part of their CV, we may have a look at it, but it's not part of the decision-making process necessarily. The product is a form, right? I'd go compare. There's no room for like amazing UI. We are solving problems, and that's what I'm looking for. So the interview is then task-based. We will usually give a task which involves either running a small workshop or presenting or kind of demonstrating how familiar the candidate is with the design process. So it really depends on the company, on the team, and on the role, most importantly, whether portfolio is needed at all. Another quick tip from me on the portfolios: if you don't want to pay, one of my designers recently came up with something brilliant. I'm sure he's not the first one to come up with it, but he moved all his portfolio in his personal Figma account. And obviously you can share the Figma. You can even create prototypes if you wanted to and share those. It's your personal account, so it's free. You don't pay anything. You can export PDFs. You can select whatever examples you want. It gives you all the flexibility in the world, and it's free. So if you're looking for a free portfolio, that works a treat. Now, we are running a little bit out of time. Alicia, I know you have a hard deadline. There are a couple of questions for you, so I'm going to just do a quick round of fire questions for you. And then if Hannah and Fiona, if you don't mind, I have one more question for kind of more seasoned designers. If you don't mind just hanging for another 5 minutes, and then we'll open for a bit more questions if you're happy with that. But we'll aim to finish at 15 past for sure, to let everybody go. So, Alicia,
I did try to answer on Slido, but I didn't understand how to do it. So bad, isn't it? Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm not very good with it either. But so, for Alicia, do you use or have you heard of people using AI as part of a sift? I've read that it can really miss out good candidates. Have you seen that yet?
So I wouldn't in a million years touch that. Like, I don't. And I also don't know any, like, we don't use it at all at SR2. And I also don't know any agency recruiters who actually use AI to sift. We don't need to. You don't get hundreds of applications anymore. Those times have changed quite a lot. But I have heard that internal recruitment teams will use that because they're sort of, the number of applicants are just way bigger than agency applications. So yes to internal recruitment teams, no to agencies. Does that mean go to an agency? Of course, I'm going to be biased and say yes. But it really concerns me. It really worries me. I can't stop it. There's obviously huge biases within it. And I don't think it's set up to do that sifting. You need human interaction. And there's so much more to people's skills than what's on paper, in my opinion. So I have heard about it, but not as much as I think people are afraid of just yet. But is it the future? I don't know.
We will see, and I'm afraid we're going to see very shortly. But what are your thoughts on using ChatGPT and Copilot to actually help you write the CV?
So I actually use pi.ai. That's my favorite. If you haven't heard of it, it's like the personalized one. You can tailor it to you.
Hi AI, you said. I'm going to test this.
Yeah, pi.ai. It's amazing. It's just it's a personalized AI. So it personalized to you. You can choose your chatbot, can choose where they're from. Is it female? Is it male? Yeah, is it English? Is it American? It's really cool. And it really tailors. You can teach it to be you so much easier than I think ChatGPT. Should you use it to write a CV? I mean, it can definitely aid, but I think your CV is you. Like, if you're going to start speaking like a AI and then have an interview, you're going to sound like a completely different person. People buy from people at the end of the day. So use your own personality and make sure that comes across. But it doesn't do no harm if you just need a couple of pointers to give you that sort of first initial structure of a CV, for sure. But yeah, I haven't seen a CV. Like, I've seen LinkedIn posts, I'm like, that's definitely wrote by, because there's Z's everywhere in your English. We know, you can tell. That's like the typical way of spotting is Z's in an English CV in all the spelling. But yeah, I haven't seen a CV and gone, oh, that's been wrote by. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in the last round, so I've last recruited for a kind of a junior designer last year, and I think I've seen a couple of, perhaps not CVs, but cover letters that felt like they were generated. It's a great tool, and I think we all should use it. And I promise you, the boys are using it. So, I mean, come on, let's not shy away from it. But like Alicia said, it's important to personalize and make it sound like yourself, but could be a good starting point. Excellent. Any good places to look for junior roles, Alicia?
So I put it as a question because I didn't know how to use Slido. So I put Slack groups are really, really good. There's so many awesome Slack groups, and finding communities within there. The dots is a pretty good one as well to use if you can handle Twitter/X. I mean, it makes me feel a bit ill, but there's a lot of groups on there. And then networking, like, there's so much. I think Bristol has woken up a little bit. I came back to Bristol in January. I spent 2 years opening our London office. Look, I ran out of there as soon as I could. Bristol seems to be waking up a little bit now. It definitely was a bit sleepy over the last couple of years. I think there's a lot of really cool networking events to get to as well. But yeah, those would be my things. And then just lastly, because this was a really interesting question, interesting to hear about Boolean searches. Do you use specific search engines or programs to sift CVs? So we use something called Ad Career, and that literally searches on every single job board. And believe it or not, recruiters still use job boards every single day, every morning. We're regimented. We use a job board. So Read, CV Library, CW Jobs, Job Site, JobServe, Indeed. Indeed's my favourite, if anyone wants to know what the best one is. But we still search on all of those job boards every morning.
Awesome. Alicia, thank you so much. It's been
super
helpful. I feel like we have to do probably a round 2 of this discussion. There's plenty of questions still unanswered.
Feel free to connect. Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions. I'm more than happy to help. I've got to pick my partner up from the train station. So, but yeah, lovely to meet you all, and thank you for having me.
Go. And I'm staying here with Fiona and Hannah. We're going to answer a couple more questions. Alicia, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. I know we're running out of time. I was way too ambitious with the number of questions I wanted to ask, but I think we can ask one more if you both are okay with it. And really, I want to kind of speak to some of the more seasoned designers. So what your advice would be for someone who feels a little bit stuck perhaps in their role? What should they do, where to start, and so on? Any thoughts, Hannah, perhaps?
I was like, oh God, don't come to me. Because it's so easy to get stuck in your role, isn't it? It's so easy to get, like, I don't know, I think I was, before I was made redundant, I was definitely kind of in that kind of, I don't know, it becomes like Stockholm syndrome, doesn't it? You're like just kind of like really like, oh, better the devil you know type thing. So I think for me, the things that really kind of get me interested, I quite like going to conferences. That's one thing I find, like UX London, UX Brighton, stuff like that, and it kind of inspires me to think about UX in different ways and sort of meet people. I don't know, I sometimes find the socializing stuff a bit intimidating personally, but I like to like listen and kind of get that kind of inspiration. And I think anyone who's kind of here and listening to this, I think this is a really good sort of forum as well to like to kind of come along and kind of do this. I think kind of Kat was talking about it earlier, was learning something new. I think kind of, if you can, and there's something you're interested in, you know, sort of taking that kind of direction and maybe kind of having a look at some courses, even if it's not directly related. At one point I was looking at product design and furniture design, because I was just like, oh, could I get back into like, you know, physical product design? I feel like industrial design is miles behind like what we do in terms of build, test, learn and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of my, I don't know, that's where I kind of sort of get a bit of inspiration from. I think if you're looking and thinking about kind of, I don't know, making a bit of a change, making a bit of a, I don't know, maybe using the network that you have to kind of talk to people to find out where they're doing. And I think, unfortunately, yeah, like kind of updating your portfolio, so when you see things, you're ready to go to kind of apply for those things. But yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, my brain's in a weird space right now in terms of like trying to work out what I'm supposed to be doing next. So yeah, I'm gonna pass over to Fiona to answer that one.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't blame you. I'm sorry. You were first in my side.
No worries.
It's an interesting one, because I think it depends what you mean by stuck, right? Because feeling stuck can mean different things to different people. I think when you're first starting out, so meaning probably for your first 4 or 5 years in UX, you're so hungry to learn and you're learning so much, and that curve, and you're doing lots and trying to keep up with stuff. I think so many people that I talk to, and the people that I've kind of onboarded into my team, is they haven't taken the time to stop and reflect. So they haven't paused and gone, what's my journey so far? What have I really enjoyed? Like the first time I asked my team individually, tell me which tasks that you do that you really enjoy. They're like, no one's ever asked me that. I was like, it's key to how we enjoy our jobs. We spend so much time in them. It's also important to kind of understand what you value and where you want to go. So I prompt my team to do a lot of self-reflection, because it's part of understanding how to grow and figuring out what they do want, because I can't help them until they know. So I give them lots of activities to do. I think self-reflection is something we forget to do. So I prompt them a lot and I give them activities, and it sparks really good conversations. And off of that, they usually find new things to learn or new opportunities in the business to get involved in. You know, one of my researchers, we've worked together for 2.5, 3 years now. And, you know, when I first took over managing her, she had no interest in mentoring. She was just like, no. And she's grown so much in the last 2 years. And now she is so hungry for it. She's mentoring outside of the business. She's volunteering. She's doing so many other things. And it's because we've really like helped her focus on like, what do you want to learn? You know, what do you want to get better at? What do you enjoy? You know, and that's kind of changed over time. You know, if you're the sort of person who loves learning, you can only learn one thing at a time. Like pick one, do it, and then get to a point and go, right, what's next? Don't try and learn everything at once. Like refine it, prioritize it, you know, keep learning, keep kind of reflecting on like, did you enjoy that? If you're not sure, try something, doesn't matter, give it a go. You've got to find out whether you like that thing or not, right? The best way to do that is to try it. Take a course. If you go, it was interesting, but it's not my bag, great, move on to something else. I think we've got to keep growing, keep searching, and definitely reflect and kind of go, was that right? Is this good? Is this where I want to be? It's kind of the only thing to kind of keep doing, right? Is reevaluating what brings us joy and where we're happy.
It's such a great advice, and it's so powerful, and it works in all aspects of life, not just career. But I think once you self-reflect and you come to the conclusion that you're not happy, perhaps, I mean, ideally you come to the conclusion that there is something that you can do to make you happy, you have to be prepared to move, right? You have to be prepared to act on it. This is where I see some of my teams getting a bit stuck, like they're not happy, but they're not prepared to move. So it's like, what do we do now? But yeah, it's such a great advice, Fiona. Thank you so much for this, and thank you, Hannah. Honestly, your perspectives have been amazing. I've learned so much. I've made some notes. I'm hoping everybody else thought that was useful and interesting. I feel like we have to do part 2 so towards the end of the year. Hopefully, Hannah, I'm sure you're gonna have like success story to share with us.